Chapter 1: The Weight of Survival. The alarm went off at 5:40 a.m., not with the polite chime of luxury, but the harsh blare of an old phone that had survived 2 cracked screens and 1 water accident. Jaiwoo groaned into the pillow, the fabric damp with last night's sweat. For a few seconds, he stared at the ceiling. Faint mold near the corner, water stains shaped like a cloud he used to imagine was luck. It wasn't. He pushed himself up. The small room barely fit a single bed, a second-hand desk, and a plastic drawer stacked with thrifted clothes. The air smelled faintly of instant coffee and detergent. His laptop light blinked from sleep mode, where his unfinished essay on global finance waited. By 6, he was in the convenience store, restocking shelves under flickering fluorescent lights. The manager's voice echoed from the back. "Jaiwoo, make sure the new ramen boxes face forward. You always forget the label direction." "Yes, sir." His tone was polite, practiced, automatic. His hands moved fast, muscle memory from months of repetition. The salary barely covered rent, but quitting wasn't an option. He needed everyone for tuition, meals, and the occasional replacement of pens that broke mid-exam. At 8:15, he clocked out, wiped sweat from his neck, and ran toward the bus stop. His reflection in the window looked older than 21. Pale skin under fluorescent light, dark circles carved like bruises. He flipped open his notes on the bus, reading between stops. The words blurred. He pressed his forehead against the glass and whispered to himself, "Just one more semester. Just keep the GPA." By noon, he was a student again. Quiet, anonymous, lost in a sea of designer bags and laughter that didn't sound tired. He sat near the back, laptop open, typing notes while the professor's voice drifted. When class ended, a classmate, Hiren, tapped his shoulder. "Jaiwoo, are you coming to lunch? We're going to the Italian place near the quad." He smiled, soft but distant. "I can't. I have work." "Again? You're gonna burn out." "Maybe later," he lied, slipping his worn notebook into his backpack. At 2, he was behind the counter of a small campus cafe, apron tied tight, smile polite. He poured coffee for students who ordered drinks that cost more than his dinner. When one customer complained about foam height, he apologized without flinching. By evening, he was at the library, his 3rd shift, tutoring freshmen in statistics. Most came unprepared. Jaiwoo stayed patient, explaining formulas until his voice grew hoarse. One of them thanked him with a snack bar. He pocketed it for breakfast. It was 11:40 p.m. when he finally reached home. He kicked off his shoes, collapsed into the chair, and opened his laptop again. His scholarship renewal email blinked unread in the inbox. He hesitated before clicking. Subject: Scholarship Renewal Interview, Cha Foundation. Time: 10 a.m., Friday. Location: Administrative Building, Room 704. Note: Attendance mandatory. Formal attire required. Jaiwoo exhaled slowly. The Cha Foundation, one of the most powerful corporate groups in the country. He'd heard rumors that they handpicked their scholars personally. That could mean new opportunities. Or danger. He closed the lid and leaned back, whispering, "Just don't screw this up." Friday came too soon. He borrowed a tie from a classmate, wore his only white shirt, and tried to press the wrinkles out with a hair straightener. His nerves buzzed like electricity. The administrative building gleamed with glass and steel, too polished for someone like him. Every step echoed. The receptionist gave him a professional smile. "Cha Foundation interview, right? 7th floor." He nodded. "Yes, thank you." Room 704 was larger than he expected. Minimalist, sun spilling through tall windows, a long table of polished oak. Several board members sat with folders open. "Please take a seat," said one of them. Jaiwoo bowed slightly, palms sweating. "Thank you for having me." Questions came quickly. GPA, work-life balance, future plans. He answered honestly, voice steady though his heart raced. Then the door opened behind him. The sound was soft, but everything in Jaiwoo stilled. Footsteps, measured, unhurried, crossed the floor. A man entered, carrying the kind of quiet confidence that couldn't be taught. Tall, Tailored suit, black hair swept neatly, a face both sharp and calm. His eyes, clear, dark, unreadable, met Jaiwoo's for a second that felt too long. Apologies for being late, Cha Min-jae, here on behalf of the foundation, he said. His voice was low, smooth. The name hit like a drop in still water. Cha. As in that Cha. Jaiwoo bowed again, instinctively, but Min-jae only nodded once, taking his seat at the end of the table. Let's proceed, Mr. Kim Jaiwoo. Correct? Min-jae said. Yes, Jaiwoo managed, throat dry. Min-jae flipped open the file, skimming through pages. You've maintained an excellent GPA under difficult circumstances. Impressive. Thank you. You work 3 jobs? Yes, sir. A pause. Min-jae looked up, and their eyes met again. This time longer, steadier. Something unspoken passed between them, quiet recognition. Not pity, not curiosity. Just attention. Minji's gaze softened slightly. That must be exhausting. Jaiwoo's lips twitched in a faint smile. Sometimes. For the rest of the interview, Jaiwoo couldn't shake that moment. The calm weight of Minji's presence. There was nothing condescending in his tone. Nothing performative. Just genuine, measured interest that felt disarming. When it ended, Jaiwoo bowed again, thanking the board. As he turned to leave, he caught one last glimpse of Min-jae. Pen poised over a document, profile composed, eyes flicking up just once to watch Jaiwoo go. Outside, Jaiwoo exhaled, realizing he'd been holding his breath. The hallway air felt colder, sharper, as if the world had shifted slightly. He didn't know why his chest felt tight. From nerves, maybe, or from the strange pull of a man who looked like he belonged to another world entirely. As he stepped back into the sunlight, Jaiwoo thought, people like him don't look twice at people like me. He was wrong. Chapter 2, The Boy Behind the Smile. Min-jae had learned long ago that silence was safer than truth. The Cha family mansion stood on a hill above Seoul, the kind of house built to impress, not to live in, glass that caught every angle of light, hallways wide enough to echo, rooms too large for warmth. Every morning at 7, breakfast was served with military precision. Porcelain dishes, silver spoons, not a sound out of place. The family gathered, but no one spoke to him. Good morning, Min-jae said softly, sliding into his seat. His father didn't look up from the newspaper. His stepmother, immaculately dressed in white silk, stirred her coffee, eyes fixed on nothing. The chair next to him, the legitimate son's, was empty as always. Taehyun had been abroad for years now, studying business, the golden heir. The only response came from the housekeeper, who gave Min-jae a polite smile as she poured him tea. He smiled back. Always the same gentle, harmless smile, the kind that deflected attention. His father folded the paper. You'll be attending the foundation meeting today. Don't be late. Yes, father. A pause. Then, almost as an afterthought, remember your place. Min-jae bowed his head. Of course. When they left the table, his stepmother's perfume lingered in the air, sweet, sharp, suffocating. He waited until the sound of her heels disappeared down the corridor before exhaling. Remember your place. The words never stopped echoing. They were the invisible walls of his life, not built of brick, but of bloodlines. By the time he reached the Cha Foundation headquarters, he had already put on his mask. The composed smile, the polite tone, the perfect posture. The staff greeted him with the respect owed to a Cha, and he nodded graciously, the way he'd been trained. Good morning, Director Cha. Morning, he replied, voice calm. He wasn't a director, not really, but no one dared ask. Inside, the boardroom buzzed with quiet anticipation. The scholarship renewal interviews had begun. A handful of scholars waited outside, clutching portfolios, nervous and hopeful. He remembered that feeling, the weight of needing to prove oneself. One of the assistants approached. Sir, we've prepared the candidate files for your review. Thank you. Min-jae took the folder, flipping through the names and photos. The pages were crisp, efficient, impersonal, until one name caught his eye. Kim Jaiwoo, economics major, top percentile GPA. 3 part-time jobs. Self-funded. There was a handwritten note at the bottom. High potential. Exceptional resilience. Min-jae found himself staring at the photo longer than necessary. The boy had tired eyes, but there was clarity in them, the kind that came from surviving, not winning. He remembered that look from mirrors he no longer used. After the meeting, he stepped into the university library, needing air or something close to quiet. His tie was loosened, his mind still half-tangled in the polite suffocation of the boardroom. A few students whispered when they saw him, voices hushed in awe. "Isn't that Cha Min-jae? The heir of Cha Group. He's so handsome. I heard he's insanely smart but never dates anyone." He smiled faintly, pretending not to hear. Rumors were easier than truth, and he preferred it that way. In the corner, a small group of underclassmen waited nervously with notebooks. "Min-jae, you said you'd help us with microeconomics?" one called. "Of course. Let's start from the elasticity graph." He sat beside them, rolling up his sleeves. For the next hour, he explained patiently, breaking down equations into soft clarity. His voice was calm, warm, even. Teaching came easily. It reminded him of what he could control. Not his birth, not his family name, but knowledge, empathy, the small things that didn't require bloodlines. When they left, one of the students bowed deeply. "Thank you, Min-jae. You make things seem less scary." He chuckled. "They're still scary. I just pretend they're not." The student grinned before hurrying off. Alone again, Min-jae packed his notes slowly. The silence wrapped around him like an old coat. He didn't mind being alone. Or at least that's what he told himself. The next scholarship committee session took place 2 days later. He arrived early, reviewing reports by the window. The winter light filtered in pale and soft. He didn't hear the door open at first. "Excuse me. I'm here for the scholarship evaluation," said a quiet voice. He turned. Jae-woo stood there, the boy from the file, real now. Same eyes, same tiredness, but sharper in person. Alive in a way photographs never capture. His clothes were simple, pressed with care, tie slightly crooked. "Mr. Kim Jae-woo?" Min-jae asked. "Yes. I hope I'm not too early." Jae-woo bowed quickly, nervous. "Not at all. You're right on time." Min-jae gestured to a seat. As Jae-woo sat, Min-jae watched him, the small, careful movements, the way he gripped his notebook too tightly. He recognized the tension. It was the posture of someone always ready to defend his right to exist. Min-jae spoke first. "Your record is excellent. You must be working very hard." Jae-woo smiled faintly. "Hard enough to stay afloat." "That's admirable. I remember that you're balancing multiple part-time jobs. That can't be easy." He hesitated, then added. Jae-woo shrugged. "You get used to it. Survival's a skill." There was no self-pity in his tone, just matter-of-fact endurance. It struck something deep in Minji's chest, a quiet ache he hadn't felt in a long time. The conversation drifted to studies, ambitions, daily struggles. Jae-woo answered with simple honesty, no embellishment. When he spoke about working nights, Min-jae caught the faint tremor of fatigue in his voice. "You should rest more," Min-jae said, almost before he realized it. Jae-woo blinked. "If I rest, I fall behind." Min-jae smiled, but there was sadness behind it. "I understand." For a moment, silence stretched between them. Not awkward, but fragile, like a pause that might become something more. Finally, Min-jae said, "If you need help with coursework, or anything academic, I could offer some guidance. I mentor some of the foundation scholars already." Jae-woo's eyes widened slightly. "You do that?" "Of course. We take care of our scholars. And I think you'd be worth the time." Minji's voice was calm, steady. The faintest blush touched Jae-woo's ears. "Thank you. I'll try not to waste it." Minji's lips curved, genuine this time. "I don't think you could." When Jae-woo left, Min-jae found himself still looking at the empty seat, pen idle in his hand. He realized he'd smiled more in those 10 minutes than in the entire week. Outside, the city stretched beyond the glass, 1,000 lives moving at once. For the first time in years, Min-jae wondered if connection was something he could have, not just observe. But even as the thought formed, another voice whispered beneath it, cold, familiar, cruel. Remember your place. He closed the file, straightened his posture, and put the smile back on. Still, as he walked out of the room, he couldn't stop himself from glancing toward the hallway, half expecting Jae-woo to still be there. Chapter 3: Foundations of a Broken Friendship. Past. The world looked different when you were 12, smaller, louder, more forgiving. Back then, Min-jae and Taehyun were inseparable. They met on the first day of middle school, both wearing uniforms that hung too big on their thin frames. Taehyun had been the loud one, confident, reckless, the kind of boy who grinned even after losing a fight. Min-jae had been the quiet one, thoughtful, observant, always a step behind but never far away. The first week, a group of older students cornered Min-jae behind the gym. "Hey, new kid, you think you're better than us just because your name's Cha?" one sneered. Min-jae didn't answer. He'd already learned that silence hurt less than talking. But before a shove could land, Taehyun appeared, baseball bat slung over his shoulder. "Why don't you pick on someone who's not worth a scholarship?" he said, grinning without fear. The bullies backed off, not because Taehyun was scary, but because he believed he was. After they left, Taehyun tossed the bat aside and turned to Min-jae. "You shouldn't let them talk to you like that." Min-jae brushed dust off his sleeve, smiling faintly. "You shouldn't get involved." Taehyun shrugged. "Too late. You're my friend now." That day, they walked home together, sharing a bag of tteokbokki from a street stall. Min-jae remembered the way Taehyun's laughter filled the air, bright and unrestrained. It was the sound of something pure. They became a pair after that. Taehyun, the fire, Min-jae, the calm. Taehyun pulled Min-jae into things he would never have dared on his own. Sneaking into empty classrooms, climbing the school gate at night just to see the city lights, laughing until their stomachs hurt. "Family doesn't define us. My parents only care about grades and reputation. I could disappear for a week, and they'd only notice if the neighbors did," Taehyun said once, lying on the soccer field grass, hands behind his head. Min-jae turned his head toward him. "That's not true. Trust me, it is. You know what? We're the same. We don't belong to anyone but ourselves." It was the kind of line only kids could say and believe. Min-jae smiled at the stars, pretending he didn't know how false it was, because deep down he wasn't the same. Not really. It happened a year later on an ordinary afternoon. They were sitting in Minji's room at the mansion, though room wasn't quite right. It was tucked away in the far corner of the estate, smaller than the guest wing, near the servants' quarters. Taehyun didn't question it. He was too busy rifling through Minji's bookshelf. "Man, you've got so many boring books, business ethics? Who reads this?" he said, pulling one out. Min-jae laughed quietly. "My father expects it." "Your father sounds like mine, rich, strict, boring. Guess that's what happens when you're born into the top 1%. Taehyun replied, rolling his eyes. Min-jae froze for a moment. The words echoed in the room like something fragile about to break. He put down his pen. "Taehyun, can I tell you something?" he said softly. Taehyun looked up. "What's with that face? You sound serious." I don't want to lie to you anymore." Taehyun frowned, confused. "Lie about what?" Min-jae took a breath, the kind that hurt on the way out. "I'm not really part of the family." "What do you mean?" "My mother wasn't married to my father. I'm illegitimate." He forced the word out, each syllable scraping against his throat. "He gave me his name, but I don't belong in the family records. I'm just there." The silence that followed was unlike any they'd had before. Heavy, endless. Taehyun blinked, uncertain. "You're joking." "I'm not. But you're a Cha. By name, not by bloodline." Taehyun's expression shifted. Confusion first, then disbelief, then something colder. He took a step back. "So you're a bastard?" Min-jae flinched but nodded. "Yes." Taehyun laughed, but it wasn't kind. It was sharp, nervous. "You're serious?" All this time, you let me think you were. I didn't let you. You never asked. Taehyun's hands clenched at his sides. Do you know what people would say if they knew I was hanging around with? With what? Min-jae asked, voice trembling now. Taehyun's lips parted, but the word wouldn't come. He wanted to say it, to push it away, but something in Minji's eyes stopped him. The quiet hurt, the pleading. Min-jae whispered, I'm still me, Taehyun. Taehyun turned away. No, you're not. Minji's breath hitched. You said we were the same. That was before I knew. The words cut deeper than shouting ever could. Min-jae stood there, the floor beneath him spinning. So that's it? You're leaving? He said. Taehyun didn't answer. He just grabbed his bag and walked toward the door. His voice came out low, tight. You should have kept it to yourself. The door clicked shut behind him. That night, Min-jae sat by the window, staring at the empty soccer field below. His reflection in the glass looked hollow. He replayed every laugh, every promise, every shared secret, now turned into ghosts. In the hallway, he could hear the faint murmur of his father's voice on the phone, talking about company mergers, stock prices, futures. No mention of him. There never was. He pressed his forehead against the cool window pane and whispered, I shouldn't have told him. But some part of him, the part still clinging to the memory of Taehyun's smile, wanted to believe that maybe one day it wouldn't matter. The next morning, he walked through the school gates alone. Taehyun passed him in the hallway without looking up. Good morning, Min-jae tried. Taehyun didn't answer. And Min-jae learned that when truth entered friendship, it could burn everything clean away, leaving only ash and the faint echo of what used to be laughter. Chapter 4: The Birth of Cruelty. Taehyun learned early that love was a transaction, one that his family never paid out freely. At home, affection came in the form of expectations. His father's words were precise, heavy as metal. The Cha family may build the country, but the Kong family keeps it running. You will not be weak, Taehyun. Weakness. That was the family curse. His father used the word like it was a disease, and his mother repeated it like a prayer. So when Taehyun started avoiding Min-jae, it wasn't because he wanted to. It was because he had to. He still remembered the night after Minji's confession. Lying awake in his room, staring at the ceiling, heart pounding with something he couldn't name. Disgust, fear, shame. Not at Min-jae, but at himself for caring. Because when Min-jae had said I'm illegitimate, a voice in Taehyun's head whispered, then what does that make you, if you loved him like a brother? He tried to silence it. He told himself he wasn't cruel, just realistic. That distance was protection. But guilt has sharp teeth. It gnawed at him until it turned into anger. By high school, Min-jae had grown quieter, paler. The other boys treated him with awkward deference, afraid of the Cha name even though rumors said it was cracked. Taehyun, meanwhile, had bloomed into everything his family admired. Charming, ambitious, unflinchingly confident. On the surface, nothing tied them together anymore. Yet Taehyun's gaze found Min-jae in every room, during assemblies, at the library, even in the way Min-jae walked, shoulders drawn tight, steps careful, as if carrying a secret he no longer wanted. It made something dark twist in Taehyun's chest. He told himself it was contempt, but it felt too much like longing. Hey, Cha, still keeping that perfect posture? I guess bastards need something to hold on to. Taehyun said one afternoon, leaning against Minji's locker. His tone was light, mocking. Min-jae froze, eyes flicking to him. Calm on the surface, but the tension was visible, a ripple under still water. Don't call me that, Min-jae said quietly. What, Cha? Or bastard? You should be grateful anyone still uses your name. Taehyun's grin didn't reach his eyes. Why are you doing this? Min-jae asked, voice low, almost pleading. Taehyun's smirk faltered. For a second, he saw the same boy who used to share tteokbokki with him on the way home, who laughed until tears came. The same boy who had trusted him. But then his father's words echoed, weakness equals ruin. He straightened. Because someone has to remind you where you stand. He walked away before Min-jae could answer. It started small. A cruel word here, a shove in the hallway, a smirk when others were watching. Taehyun mastered the art of precision cruelty. He never hit hard enough to leave bruises, never said enough to be punished, but always just enough for Min-jae to feel the sting. It became a game, a mask he wore too long until he forgot what his real face looked like. One evening, during basketball practice, Min-jae was assigned to his team. The coach clapped Taehyun on the shoulder. "You're the captain. Teach him how to play aggressively." "Sure," Taehyun said, spinning the ball between his hands. The game started. The air was thick with sweat and the squeak of sneakers. When Min-jae went for the ball, Taehyun blocked him hard. Too hard. The impact sent Min-jae stumbling backward. "Come on, Cha. Is that all? Thought you rich boys had better balance." Taehyun barked. Min-jae's jaw clenched. "You didn't have to push." Taehyun laughed. "Maybe you shouldn't fall so easily." The others chuckled nervously. Min-jae's eyes burned. Not with anger, but hurt. That look cut deeper than any punch. Taehyun felt it hit somewhere under his ribs, but he smothered it with a sneer. Later, in the locker room, he caught his reflection. Hair damp, chest heaving, face twisted into something unrecognizable. He punched the metal locker once, just to feel pain that wasn't guilt. At home, the silence was worse. His father's voice filled the dinner table like a sermon. "You must understand, Taehyun. People like us can't afford compassion. The moment you pity someone beneath you, they'll drag you down." Taehyun nodded, expression blank. "Yes, father." Inside he thought, "You're wrong." But he said nothing. Weeks turned into months. The distance between him and Min-jae stretched until it became its own language. They didn't speak, didn't meet eyes. But sometimes, when the corridors emptied, Taehyun caught glimpses. Min-jae sitting alone, sketching notes, face calm but lonely. He wanted to go to him, to say something that would undo the damage. But pride was heavier than honesty. Instead, he made it worse. During a group presentation, he interrupted Min-jae mid-sentence. "You talk too softly," he said in front of everyone. "Maybe that's why people forget you exist." The class laughed awkwardly. Min-jae didn't. He simply met Taehyun's gaze for a long, unbearable second, eyes filled with quiet sadness. Then he said, "You've changed." Taehyun forced a smirk. "No, I just stopped pretending." But after class, he couldn't breathe. The breaking point came not with a fight, but a letter. His father called him into the study one night. The desk was covered in neat envelopes. "You've been accepted," his father said. "London Business Program. You leave next month." Taehyun stared at the paper, heart sinking. "That's fast. You should be proud. You'll be away from distractions, from useless attachments." His father said. Taehyun knew what he meant. He didn't argue. Later, he found himself standing outside the Cha mansion gates. He didn't know why he came. Maybe to say goodbye, maybe to prove to himself that he didn't care anymore. The lights inside were dim. He saw Min-jae through the window, seated at a piano, fingers tracing the keys without sound. He almost called out. Almost. Instead, he turned away, shoving his hands into his pockets. The night air bit against his throat. "Goodbye," he whispered to no one. When the plane took off weeks later, he watched the city shrink below him. The glittering skyline, the neighborhoods, the streets they used to walk. Somewhere down there, Min-jae still existed. He told himself it didn't matter, that he'd buried that part of himself. But as the clouds swallowed Seoul, Taehyun pressed his forehead against the window and felt something hollow open inside him. A space shaped like guilt, or maybe like Min-jae. He didn't know it yet, but cruelty would become his armor. And one day, that armor would be the only thing left. Chapter 5: Crossing Paths Again. The winter semester came in quietly, like a sigh. Jaiwoo barely noticed the days blurring together anymore. Class, cafe, tutoring, sleep. But somewhere between exhaustion and habit, Min-jae had become part of the rhythm. It started with coffee. After one of the scholarship meetings, Min-jae had offered, "You look like you haven't eaten all day. Come on, my treat. Jaiwoo tried to refuse, out of politeness, but Min-jae didn't take no for an answer. That was how their quiet routine began. The two of them sitting in a small diner near campus. Minji's tie loosened, Jaiwoo's notebook always half open. They didn't talk much at first. Silence between them wasn't heavy. It was gentle, like rest. One night, Jaiwoo had been struggling through a paper at the library, face buried in spreadsheets. Min-jae appeared with 2 cups of hot chocolate and a small smile. You've been staring at that same line for 10 minutes. I'm doing complex math, Jaiwoo muttered. You're doing burnout, Min-jae replied, sitting down beside him. Jaiwoo laughed under his breath. Says the man who works 12-hour days. Touché, but at least I have coffee privileges. Min-jae admitted. Their laughter faded into something softer, the kind of quiet that felt like safety. For Jaiwoo, Min-jae was unlike anyone he'd ever met. Composed but kind, distant yet never cold. And sometimes, when Min-jae looked at him, really looked, Jaiwoo felt seen in a way that scared him. Still, Min-jae kept a certain distance, like there was a wall around him made of glass. Jaiwoo never asked what it was made of. Then one morning, the glass cracked. The dean introduced a new transfer student at the partnership program orientation. Please welcome Kang Tae-hyun, joining us from the London School of Business. The name hit Min-jae like a sharp breath. For a moment, he thought he'd misheard. But when the tall figure walked into the lecture hall, confident, sleek, faintly smirking, the years between them vanished. Tae-hyun. He looked almost the same, only sharper. His voice had deepened. His hair swept neatly back. His confidence still the kind that made rooms shift around him. When their eyes met across the hall, it was like the world paused, recognition crashing hard, raw and wordless. Minji's stomach tightened. He forced himself to look away. Jaiwoo, sitting beside him, noticed the flicker. You okay? I'm fine, Min-jae said quickly. Too quickly. Later that day, fate or cruel coincidence placed them together in the same project group. Jaiwoo arrived early, setting out notes across the study room table. Min-jae followed, calm on the outside, but his pulse wouldn't settle. Then Tae-hyun walked in, late as always, carrying his old arrogance like perfume. Well, didn't expect to see familiar faces here, he drawled, glancing between them. Hello, Tae-hyun, Min-jae said evenly. Min-jae. The name rolled off his tongue with quiet venom. Still the model student, I see. Min-jae smiled thinly. Still late, I see. Jaiwoo blinked, sensing the undercurrent immediately. You two know each other? Tae-hyun looked at him with mild amusement. We go way back. Childhood friends. Sort of. Friends, Min-jae echoed, the word tasting bitter. Tae-hyun smirked. If you can call it that. The air turned sharp. Jaiwoo's eyes darted between them, unsure. Whatever history stood between them, it wasn't just old friendship. It was something cracked and bleeding beneath the surface. The tension only grew. During project meetings, Tae-hyun picked at Minji's every suggestion. Too cautious, typical Min-jae, afraid to make bold moves, he'd say. And Min-jae, ever composed, would reply, and you're still reckless, I see. Some things never change. Jaiwoo tried to keep the peace, mediating between them with forced calm. But every word felt like walking through glass shards. One evening, after a particularly cold meeting, Jaiwoo found Min-jae sitting alone on a campus bench, hands clasped tightly. The wind tugged at his hair. He's testing you, Jaiwoo said gently. Min-jae gave a soft, humorless laugh. He's always been good at that. Did something happen between you two? Jaiwoo asked. Min-jae hesitated. Yes, but it's old. Too old. It's better forgotten. He looked down. Jaiwoo didn't press. He just sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders brushed. Then don't let him make you small again. Min-jae turned his head slightly. The moonlight caught Jaiwoo's face. Open, kind, steady. For a fleeting second, Min-jae wanted to tell him everything. But the words stayed trapped behind the walls he'd built years ago. Thank you, he said instead. The next day, Taehyun cornered Min-jae in an empty hallway. So this is what you've been doing? Playing mentor to scholarship kids. Minji's eyes narrowed. His name is Jae-woo. And yes, I'm helping him. The same way I used to help you, remember? Taehyun scoffed. Don't compare me to him. Why not? You were the one who taught me friendship didn't need bloodlines. Or did you forget? Min-jae shot back. Taehyun froze. For a heartbeat, the mask slipped, guilt flickering like lightning. Then he stepped closer, voice low. You don't get to use my words against me. Then stop pretending you care enough to say them, Min-jae whispered. They stood close enough to feel each other's breath. Taehyun's jaw clenched, and before he could speak again, Min-jae turned and walked away. When Jae-woo saw Min-jae later that night, his expression was unreadable. Tired, but not defeated. Jae-woo handed him a cup of tea, no questions asked. Min-jae accepted it quietly. Rough day. Something like that. Jae-woo smiled softly. You don't have to explain. You just look like you need something warm. Min-jae watched the steam curl from the cup, felt the faint heat against his skin. For the first time in years, someone had offered him comfort without conditions. And somewhere down the hall, Taehyun stood by the window, watching them from a distance. Face hard, heart aching in ways he couldn't admit. He told himself it was irritation, jealousy, nostalgia, anything but the truth. Because seeing Min-jae laugh softly beside someone else felt like losing him all over again. That night, Min-jae sat at his desk, staring at the half-finished project notes. The screen glowed cold blue against the dark. He typed a message, Taehyun, we need to talk, then deleted it. Some wounds didn't deserve reopening. But when he closed his laptop, his mind replayed the look in Taehyun's eyes. The same mix of anger and something that looked too much like regret. And beneath it all, he wondered if old bonds could ever truly die, or if they only changed shape, waiting for a moment to burn again. Chapter 6, The Third Target. Taehyun noticed it first. The way Minji's eyes softened whenever Jae-woo spoke. It was subtle. A tilt of the head, the faintest curve at the corner of his mouth. But Taehyun knew that look. He'd seen it once, long ago, when they were boys, before everything fell apart. And now, watching it return on someone else's account made his blood run cold. Jae-woo had become a fixture in their project group. Organized, diligent, infuriatingly calm. He didn't seek attention, didn't speak unless he had to. Yet somehow, his quiet sincerity drew Min-jae in. Every time Jae-woo smiled, Taehyun felt something sharp twist in his chest. He masked it with arrogance. So, that's your idea of efficiency? Cute. Taehyun drawled one afternoon, leaning back in his chair as Jae-woo finished presenting their segment. Jae-woo blinked, caught off guard. It meets the requirements. Barely. Maybe the Cha Foundation should spend more on talent and less on charity. Taehyun smiled thinly. The room went still. Minji's expression hardened, but Jae-woo only adjusted his notes. If there's something wrong with the data, I can fix it. Taehyun arched a brow. You're used to fixing things, aren't you? Cleaning up for people richer than you. Guess old habits die hard. Minji's chair scraped as he stood. That's enough, Taehyun. But Jae-woo raised a hand. It's fine. I've heard worse. He smiled, small and tired, and for some reason that infuriated Taehyun even more. There was no defiance, no anger, just quiet endurance, as if Taehyun's cruelty didn't matter enough to fight. That, more than anything, made him want to break something. The next few days, Taehyun made Jae-woo his personal test. He'd call him the scholarship pet when others were near, his tone casual enough to pass as a joke. Fetch the updated report, will you? You're good at fetching things. Don't take it personally. You're just here to make the rest of us look generous. Jae-woo would bow slightly, retrieve the papers, and continue working. Never once did he snap back. Min-jae saw everything. Each jab was a knife he couldn't deflect without reopening old scars. He confronted Taehyun once in the corridor, voice low and trembling. Why him? Taehyun's smirk faltered. Why not? You always had a thing for strays. You're doing this because of me. Don't flatter yourself. Minji's jaw clenched. He's done nothing to you. That's the problem, he makes it look easy. You never did. Taehyun said softly. For a second, something flickered in Taehyun's eyes. Not cruelty, but confusion. Then he turned and left before Min-jae could answer. Jae-woo didn't tell Min-jae how much it stung. How every small humiliation piled up until his chest felt heavy with unshed words. He knew Taehyun's power, and more than that, he knew Minji's secret hung in the balance. It was during a late night in the study lounge when Jae-woo overheard them. Taehyun's voice, low and cold. Careful who you defend, Min-jae. Some of us still remember what you really are. Jae-woo froze behind a shelf. He didn't understand everything, but the word bastard slipped through the tension, enough to make his breath catch. So that was it. The weapon Taehyun kept sheathed behind his smirk. When Min-jae left moments later, pale and tight-lipped, Jae-woo stepped into the open. You must be tired, he said quietly. Taehyun turned, brows raised. Of what? Dragging someone else down just to stay standing. Taehyun laughed under his breath, sharp and humorless. You think you know me? I don't need to. I just see what you do. Jae-woo replied. For a heartbeat, Taehyun looked startled, like no one had ever spoken to him that way. Then he recovered, stepping closer. You're brave for a charity case. I'm not brave, just tired of people like you, Jae-woo said. Their eyes locked, Jae-woo steady, Taehyun's mask beginning to crack. Something raw flashed in his expression before he shoved it down again. You should learn your place. I already know it, it's the one I worked for. Can you say the same? Jae-woo said, voice steady. Taehyun didn't answer. He left, the echo of his footsteps jagged in the quiet hall. The next day, Min-jae found Jae-woo sitting alone in the courtyard. He said something, didn't he? Jae-woo shook his head. Nothing I couldn't handle. Jae-woo. I mean it, he can call me whatever he wants. I just don't want him using your name to hurt people. Jae-woo interrupted, eyes soft. Minji's breath hitched. You heard. Not everything. Just enough to know he's wrong. For a moment, Min-jae looked ready to break. You shouldn't have to deal with any of this. Jae-woo smiled faintly. You think I'm fragile, Min-jae, but I've lived my whole life being less than someone else. It doesn't scare me anymore. Minji's throat tightened. You shouldn't have to be strong like that. Maybe not, but I am, Jae-woo said. That evening, the three of them met again to finalize their project presentation. The air was brittle with things unsaid. Jae-woo handed Taehyun his section without a word. Taehyun glanced at it, then deliberately tossed it onto the table. Redo it. Jae-woo looked up. Why? Because I said so. No. The word landed like a slap. Both Taehyun and Min-jae froze. Jae-woo's voice wasn't loud, but it was steady. I'm done letting you treat people like they're beneath you. You can't hide behind your name forever. It doesn't make you strong. It just makes you lonely. Jae-woo said, meeting Taehyun's eyes. Min-jae stood behind him silently, the tension in his shoulders easing into something almost like pride. Taehyun's jaw worked, but no sound came. He looked at Jae-woo, really looked, and for the first time saw no fear, only quiet conviction. Then Jae-woo turned to Min-jae. Let's finish this without him. They walked out together, side by side, leaving Taehyun standing in the empty room, the echo of Jae-woo's words circling him like ghosts. He wanted to hate him, he really did, but what burned in his chest wasn't hatred. It was envy. It was recognition. It was the terrifying realization that Jae-woo had something he'd lost long ago. A clean kind of strength, one that didn't need to crush others to exist. That night, Taehyun couldn't sleep. The memory of Jae-woo's steady gaze wouldn't leave him. For the first time in years, someone had stood up to him. Not with fear, not with power, but with truth. And deep down, beneath layers of pride and poison, a small part of him wondered if this was what Min-jae had seen all along. Chapter 7, Lines and Lies. The tension on campus had become something everyone could feel, the kind of stillness that comes before a storm. Whispers followed Jae-woo in the corridors. Nothing explicit, just the faint murmurs that carried Taehyun's voice behind them. Charity case, teacher's favorite, Cha Foundation's pet. He didn't respond. He never did. But Min-jae noticed. One night, after another late group meeting, Min-jae waited for Taehyun outside the lecture hall. The air was cold enough to burn when he breathed. When Taehyun finally appeared, Min-jae stepped forward. "We need to talk." Taehyun gave him a thin smile. "That's new. You've been avoiding me like I bite." "Stop," Min-jae said quietly. "Stop what?" "Whatever you're doing to Jaewoo." Taehyun chuckled, hands sliding into his pockets. "I'm not doing anything. He just happens to bruise easily." "Don't lie to me. You've been spreading things. Insinuations. I know how this game works. You taught it to me." Minji's voice trembled, not with fear but with exhaustion. For a moment, Taehyun's mask slipped. "Funny, you talk like you're some saint now. But you and I both know what you are underneath all that politeness," he murmured, stepping closer. Minji's jaw tightened. "This isn't about me." "Oh, it's always about you. You think protecting him will fix you? You couldn't even protect yourself back then," Taehyun said. His smile was cruel, but his voice was shaking. The words hit like a slap. Min-jae flinched. "That's right, you couldn't stop me when it mattered. So what makes you think you can stop me now?" Taehyun continued, low and merciless. "Because I'm not that boy anymore, and neither are you," Min-jae whispered. Taehyun looked at him for a long, heavy moment, something almost like regret flickering in his eyes. Then he turned and walked away, leaving Min-jae in the hall with nothing but the echo of their shared ruin. Jaewoo had been in the next room, waiting for Min-jae. He hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but when he heard Taehyun's voice, low, vicious, curiosity turned to dread. He heard fragments. "Protect yourself. Couldn't stop me. Bastard." And then, the sound of Minji's voice cracking. Jaewoo froze, heart pounding. He didn't understand it all, but the pain in Minji's tone said enough. When Min-jae finally walked into the study room, Jaewoo saw the tremor in his hands before he could hide it. "Are you okay?" Jaewoo asked softly. Min-jae nodded once, too quickly. "Fine. You don't look fine." "I said I'm fine." He dropped his bag onto the table with a thud, then immediately winced at his own sharpness. "Sorry. I need a minute." Jaewoo didn't press. He simply set a cup of tea in front of him, the way he always did when words failed. "You don't have to talk, just breathe," he said. For a long time, neither spoke. The clock ticked, the steam curled, and the silence softened between them. Then Min-jae spoke, voice low. "Jaewoo, if you heard anything earlier, just forget it. Please." "I heard a little, not on purpose," Jaewoo admitted. Minji's fingers tightened around the cup. "Then you know." Jaewoo frowned. "Know what?" "That I'm not." He swallowed hard. "That my name, my family, it's not really mine." Jaewoo tilted his head, waiting. "I'm not a legitimate son," Min-jae continued, barely above a whisper. "The Cha Foundation, the family business, it's all built on an image that doesn't include me. My existence is a mistake they just learned to hide." He looked up, meeting Jaewoo's eyes. "I'm not who people think I am." Jaewoo watched him carefully, the way Minji's mask cracked open for the first time. The raw fear there wasn't about exposure. It was about rejection. He exhaled slowly. "Okay." Min-jae blinked. "Okay." Jaewoo smiled faintly. "You're still you. That's all I care about." "You don't understand." "No, I do. Your blood doesn't change who you are, Min-jae. You've always been kind to me. You work hard, you treat people decently. That's the person I see." Jaewoo's tone was quiet but firm. Minji's voice broke. "But everyone else." "I'm not everyone else." Something in Minji's chest gave way then, like a dam breaking in silence. He covered his face with one hand, trying to steady his breath, but Jaewoo reached out and gently pulled his hand down. "Hey, you don't have to hide with me," Jaewoo said softly. The words landed with a weight Min-jae didn't expect. No one had ever said that to him before. Not his family. Not Taehyun. No one. He looked at Jaewoo, really looked. The steady eyes, the faint smile, the warmth that asked for nothing in return. And it hit him, Jaewoo wasn't just kind. He was safe. Why aren't you afraid of being seen with me? Min-jae asked quietly. Because I know what it's like to be seen as less. It doesn't make you less worthy of being cared for, Jae-woo said. Min-jae's throat tightened. You make it sound easy. It's not. But you don't have to do it alone. Jae-woo admitted. For a moment, the world shrank to the space between them. The faint hum of the heater, the dim glow of the study lamp, the closeness that neither dared name. Then Jae-woo stood. Come on, you need food, not guilt, he said gently. Min-jae smiled weakly. You sound like my conscience. I'll take that as a compliment. He grabbed Min-jae's coat and handed it to him. When their fingers brushed, Min-jae's breath caught. Not because of surprise, but because of how right it felt. Later that night, after Jae-woo had gone home, Min-jae sat at his desk, staring at his reflection in the window. For the first time in years, he didn't see the bastard child of a broken family. He saw someone Jae-woo had looked at without judgment. He thought of Taehyun's words, you couldn't protect yourself. And then Jae-woo's, you don't have to hide with me. One voice burned, the other healed. And somewhere in the middle, Min-jae's heart began to shift. Maybe he thought he'd been trying to protect the wrong person all this time. Maybe what he really wanted was to be seen, the way Jae-woo saw him, flawed, tired, still worthy. He didn't say it out loud. Not yet. But when he closed his eyes, Jae-woo's voice lingered like a prayer he didn't know he needed. Your blood doesn't change who you are. And for the first time, Min-jae almost believed it. Chapter 8, The Breaking Point. It started with silence. The kind that hums under the skin before something cracks. Jae-woo had been patient, too patient. For weeks, Taehyun's presence had become unbearable. His words no longer stung like barbs. They sliced clean, deliberate, designed to make Jae-woo bend. Taehyun wasn't just cruel anymore, he was focused. It began subtly, reassigning Jae-woo's share of their project again and again. Do it over, he'd say, voice cool, eyes sharp. If you want to prove you belong here, do it right. Then came the errands. Fetching coffee, carrying binders, running documents between departments when no one else would. Each command was small enough to look harmless from the outside, but Jae-woo could see the intent behind everyone. He wasn't Taehyun's assistant. He was his punishment. Min-jae noticed. Of course he did. The guilt was eating him alive. But every time he tried to intervene, Jae-woo shook his head, whispering, Don't. If you fight him, he'll just hurt you instead. That was the truth Jae-woo hated most, that Taehyun's cruelty wasn't really about him. It was about Min-jae. He was just the collateral. It all came to a head one rainy afternoon. The classroom was empty except for the three of them, the light gray and cold through the windows. Taehyun sat on the edge of the desk, arms crossed, watching Jae-woo gather stacks of papers. You missed 2 formatting errors, he said lazily. I checked 3 times, Jae-woo replied, his voice quiet but firm. Then check a 4th. Or maybe ask Min-jae to proofread for you. I'm sure he's good at fixing other people's messes. Min-jae's head snapped up. Enough, Taehyun. Taehyun's smile didn't waver. I'm just trying to help him meet the standard. Your standard? You keep moving the goalposts just to watch people trip. Jae-woo said suddenly. His tone wasn't loud, but it cut through the room. Taehyun tilted his head. Careful. You sound ungrateful. Ungrateful? You humiliate people and call it guidance. Jae-woo let out a low, incredulous laugh. Taehyun stood, his expression hardening. Watch your tone. No, you don't get to tell me how to talk. You've been using me to get to him. Jae-woo said. He pointed at Min-jae. That's all this has been, hasn't it? Min-jae's face went pale. Jae-woo, don't defend him. He hides behind this arrogance because he's terrified of looking weak. You think I don't see that? Jae-woo's voice shook, but not from fear. Taehyun's jaw clenched. You don't know anything about me. I know enough. You hate Min-jae because he reminds you of what you lost. The person you used to be before you decided cruelty was easier than regret. Jae-woo took a step closer. Stop talking. Jae-woo didn't. You can't stand that he moved on. That someone else saw something good in him after you tried to destroy it. Jae-woo, Min-jae started. But before he could finish, Taehyun's hand slammed onto the desk beside him, the sound echoing like thunder. I said stop. The room went dead still. Rain hit the windows harder. Jae-woo looked him straight in the eye. No flinch, no fear. And for a moment, Taehyun saw something that unsettled him more than defiance. Pity. And that broke him. He grabbed Jae-woo's wrist. Not hard enough to bruise, but enough to hurt. You think you can read me? You're just a shadow in his story. You don't matter. He hissed. Jae-woo's voice trembled, but only with anger. Then stop pretending you need to prove that. He tore his wrist free, and before Taehyun could react, the sound of a slap cracked through the air. Jae-woo's hand hung in the space between them, shaking. His breathing came fast, ragged. I'm done. I'm done being used as leverage between whatever war you two are fighting, he said. He turned to Min-jae. If he wants to destroy himself, let him do it alone. Then Jae-woo walked out, leaving the door open behind him. The sound of his footsteps faded down the hall, but the silence he left behind was deafening. For a long moment, neither Min-jae nor Taehyun moved. Then Min-jae spoke. Do you even hear yourself anymore? His voice was quiet, almost eerily so. Taehyun didn't answer. His jaw was tight, eyes locked on the floor. You think this makes you strong? You think hurting people makes you matter? You've been doing this since we were kids. Twisting pain into control because you can't stand to be the one bleeding. Min-jae's tone rose. Taehyun's eyes flicked up, sharp. Don't you dare act like you understand me. I do understand. That's what makes it worse. Min-jae snapped. Taehyun stepped forward, expression cracking. You left me first. You pushed me away. You made me ashamed for existing, for being something I couldn't change. And now you're doing it again. Only this time, you found someone smaller to crush because I'm not easy to reach anymore. Min-jae's voice broke. That's not. Stop lying. To me, to him, to yourself. You're miserable and you want everyone else to drown with you. Min-jae shouted. For a heartbeat, it looked like Taehyun might hit him. His fists trembled at his sides, his breathing uneven. But then he just stopped. The anger drained, replaced by something hollow. I hate you. Because I never stopped caring. Taehyun whispered. The words hit Min-jae harder than any strike could have. His expression faltered. Grief, pity, disbelief all mixing together. Then you should have learned how to care without destroying everything, Min-jae said quietly. Neither of them spoke after that. Taehyun turned away first, his voice barely a rasp. Get out, Min-jae. Min-jae did. He left the room, every step heavy with everything they'd never fixed. Outside, the rain had turned to drizzle. Jae-woo was sitting under the eaves, arms wrapped around his knees. When he saw Min-jae, he stood immediately. I shouldn't have left like that, Jae-woo said. No, you did the right thing, Min-jae said softly. He looked at Jae-woo, really looked, and for the first time saw not just kindness but fire, strength, the kind of quiet courage that refused to be broken. Come on, let's go home, Jae-woo murmured. Min-jae nodded. Yeah, let's. And behind them, in that empty room, Taehyun sat in silence. A man who had finally realized that every wound he'd ever given was one he couldn't stop reopening in himself. Chapter 9, Guilt and Cracks. The silence after the storm was worse than the shouting. For the first time in years, Taehyun didn't know what to do with himself. The echo of Jae-woo's slap still lingered on his skin, not from the sting, but from the truth buried inside it. He'd gone too far, and this time there was no way to twist it into strength. He sat in his car long after dark, the rain tracing nervous lines down the windshield. The city lights blurred into a smear of gold and gray, and somewhere beneath the hum of traffic, he could hear his own heartbeat. Uneven, angry, guilty. He had built his life on control. Every word measured, every gesture rehearsed. Weakness was a language he'd been forbidden to speak. His father's voice still echoed like a curse. You can't afford to be soft, Taehyun. Soft men are devoured. He used to believe that, until now. Now, all he could think about was the look on Jae-woo's face when he'd said, You're terrified of looking weak, It hadn't been mockery, it had been understanding. And that made it unbearable. Days passed, but the guilt didn't. It sat heavy on his chest, threading itself through every word, every class, every breath. He saw Jaiwoo again, not by choice, but because fate seemed to enjoy cornering him. The three of them shared a research assignment. Min-jae avoided eye contact, his politeness brittle, while Jaiwoo remained civil, distant but composed. Taehyun tried to ignore it, to retreat into the familiar rhythm of sarcasm and superiority. But it didn't work. One afternoon, he watched Jaiwoo handle a crisis that should have been his breaking point. A group project member had quit at the last minute, dumping half the workload on him. Jaiwoo didn't complain. He simply rolled up his sleeves and worked through the night. When Taehyun saw him the next morning, Jaiwoo's eyes were rimmed with exhaustion. Yet he still smiled at the professor and handed in their paper. There was no bitterness, no self-pity, just quiet endurance. Something in Taehyun twisted. Later, in the library, he caught himself watching Jaiwoo from the next table over, the way he chewed on the end of his pen, the faint crease between his brows when he focused. It wasn't admiration. It wasn't even guilt anymore. It was something far more dangerous. Recognition. He saw in Jaiwoo what he'd lost years ago. Decency that survived cruelty, strength that didn't need armor. And it terrified him. That night, Taehyun dreamed. He was 15 again, sitting under the gym bleachers beside Min-jae. The air smelled of sweat and dust. Min-jae's laughter had been soft back then, a quiet sound that made the world feel safe. You don't have to pretend so much, you're allowed to be tired, Min-jae had said, passing him a chocolate bar. Tired people get stepped on, Taehyun had muttered. Min-jae smiled, that kind of smile that saw through walls. Not if someone stands beside them. He woke up before he could answer. His throat ached, his chest felt hollow. He spent the next day in a fog, skipping a lecture, wandering the campus aimlessly until he ended up near the faculty lounge. That's where he found Jaiwoo again. Jaiwoo was sitting on a bench outside, reading notes with a half-eaten sandwich in his lap. The autumn wind tugged at his hair. When he noticed Taehyun, his expression tightened, but he didn't look away. Do you need something? Jaiwoo asked calmly. Taehyun opened his mouth, closed it, and exhaled. No, He stopped, the words foreign on his tongue. I shouldn't have treated you like that. Jaiwoo blinked, caught off guard. Is that an apology? I don't know. Maybe. Taehyun forced a short, brittle laugh. Silence. The leaves rustled above them. Taehyun shoved his hands into his pockets, unable to meet Jaiwoo's eyes. You were right, I've been using you. And Min-jae, trying to prove something. I don't even know what anymore. Jaiwoo studied him quietly. There was no triumph in his gaze, no smugness. Just an unsettling kind of empathy. Then maybe stop fighting ghosts, you're bleeding over people who never cut you, he said softly. Taehyun looked at him sharply. You think it's that simple? No, but it has to start somewhere, Jaiwoo said. The wind shifted, and for a second, neither of them spoke. Taehyun's chest tightened, the space between them humming with something he didn't want to name. He should have looked away, but Jaiwoo's eyes held him there, calm, steady, unafraid. I don't get you, Taehyun said at last. That's fine, you don't have to, Jaiwoo replied. When Jaiwoo stood to leave, Taehyun reached out instinctively, not to stop him, but just to anchor himself to the moment. His fingers brushed Jaiwoo's sleeve, then withdrew as if burned. Jaiwoo, I meant it. I'm sorry, he said quietly. Jaiwoo hesitated, then nodded once. I know. And then he was gone. For the first time in years, Taehyun felt small. He walked the long way home, his reflection in the dark windows of the city buildings flickering like a ghost. The mask he'd worn for so long didn't fit anymore. Felt heavy, suffocating. He thought about Min-jae, the boy who once said, "We're the same. Family doesn't define us." And about Jaiwoo, the man who lived that truth without ever needing to say it. Taehyun realized then that maybe he didn't hate either of them. Maybe he hated the version of himself that couldn't be like them. When he reached his apartment, he stood at the door for a long time before entering. Inside, the silence greeted him again, patient and cold. For the first time, he didn't run from it. He sat down, pressed a hand against his chest, and whispered into the dark. "I'm sorry. It wasn't much, but it was a start." Chapter 10: Gentle Hands. The world outside was hushed that night. Rain whispered against the windows again, soft and steady. A rhythm Jaiwoo had come to recognize as the city's quiet way of forgiving. Inside Minji's small apartment, the lights were dim, the air carrying the faint scent of chamomile tea and laundry detergent. Jaiwoo sat cross-legged on the couch, grading notes for class, while Min-jae lingered near the window, staring into the blur of city lights. He'd barely spoken since the confrontation with Taehyun a few days earlier. His posture was polite, careful, the kind that made Jaiwoo ache because he knew it was just another form of self-defense. "Min-jae, you don't have to keep pretending you're okay," Jaiwoo said gently, closing his notebook. Min-jae turned slightly, his voice quiet. "I'm fine. Really. You're not. You've been staring at the same streetlight for 20 minutes. Jaiwoo replied. A soft smile tugged at Minji's lips. "You notice too much. That's because you hide too much." Min-jae finally looked at him, really looked, and something in his eyes cracked. He crossed the room, slow and hesitant, until he was standing in front of Jaiwoo. "Do you ever get tired of being the one who sees through people? Only when they refuse to let me." Minji's breath hitched. "I don't mean to push you away. He broke off, searching for the right words. "When people know too much about me, they leave. It's easier if they never see everything." Jaiwoo's reply was quiet but firm. "Then let me be the exception." For a long moment, neither of them moved. The rain filled the silence between them like a pulse. Then, Min-jae sat beside him, close enough that Jaiwoo could feel the warmth of his arm through his sweater. His hand trembled once before he reached out, slow, deliberate, and brushed his fingers against Jaiwoo's. It wasn't a kiss, not yet, but the air changed instantly. Jaiwoo turned his hand over, their fingers interlacing. The contact was gentle, grounding. "You don't have to say anything," Jaiwoo murmured. "Just stay." Min-jae exhaled shakily, and for the first time in a long while he did. He let himself lean, not as the Cha family's forgotten son or the polished scholar everyone admired, but as someone who just wanted to be held. Jaiwoo's other hand rose instinctively, cupping the side of his face. Minji's skin was warm, his jaw tense beneath Jaiwoo's thumb. When Jaiwoo whispered, "You don't have to be strong tonight," Minji's restraint finally cracked. He leaned in, pressing his forehead against Jaiwoo's, and for a breathless moment, all the noise inside him went quiet. Then their lips met, slow at first, uncertain, then surer as Minji's hand slid to Jaiwoo's neck, pulling him closer. The kiss wasn't rushed or hungry. It was an exhale, a release, a silent confession of all the words they'd been too afraid to say. When they finally broke apart, Jaiwoo rested his head on Minji's shoulder. "You're shaking," he whispered. "I'm not used to being treated like something that won't break," Min-jae admitted. Jaiwoo smiled softly. "Then we'll both learn." The night stretched on, soft touches, quiet laughter, warmth replacing every shadow. Nothing about it felt like escape, felt like coming home. The next morning, sunlight poured through the curtains. Min-jae had fallen asleep with his head resting on Jaiwoo's arm, their fingers still loosely entwined. Jaiwoo watched him for a moment, the unguarded peace on his face, the faint crease between his brows even in rest. He brushed a strand of hair from Minji's forehead and whispered, "You're safe." He didn't know Min-jae heard it, but he did. A few days later, the world intruded again. Their professor announced new study pairings for the semester. Jaiwoo's name flashed beside Taehyun's on the projector screen. The room went uncomfortably quiet. Min-jae looked up, his expression carefully neutral, but Jaiwoo could see the tension in his shoulders. After class, Jaiwoo found Taehyun waiting by the door. His posture was stiff, as if bracing for an explosion. "Looks like we're partners," he said. "Yeah. Guess we'll have to survive it," Jaiwoo replied, They worked in the study lounge that afternoon, an invisible wall of awkwardness between them. Jae-woo focused on his notes, ignoring the way Taehyun kept fidgeting with his pen. "You can relax, I don't bite," Jae-woo said eventually. Taehyun shot him a quick glare. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" "What, seeing you act human?" "Maybe a little." Taehyun sighed, rubbing his temple. "You really don't let up. Someone has to balance out all your charm." That earned the faintest huff of laughter, the kind that sounded like it surprised even him. Jae-woo looked up, catching the corner of a smile before it vanished. "You're impossible," Taehyun muttered. "You say that like it's an insult." They worked in silence again, but something had shifted. The tension was still there, but thinner now, replaced by something hesitant, fragile. Halfway through, Taehyun's hand brushed Jae-woo's as they reached for the same pen. He froze, eyes darting up. "Sorry. It's fine, you don't have to apologize for existing," Jae-woo said gently. Taehyun stared at him for a long second before looking away. "You keep saying things like that, like you mean them." "I do." "Then you're either the kindest person I've met, or the most dangerous," Taehyun said quietly. Jae-woo smiled faintly. "Maybe both." When their session ended, Taehyun lingered at the door. "Jae-woo," he said, almost too softly to hear. "Back then, you didn't have to forgive me." "I didn't. But maybe you deserve the chance to forgive yourself," Jae-woo replied, slinging his bag over his shoulder. Taehyun didn't answer, but his eyes softened, just a fraction. Enough for Jae-woo to see the man buried under all the armor. As Jae-woo walked away, Taehyun exhaled, the weight in his chest easing for the first time in years. And somewhere deep down, he realized that the cracks he'd been fighting so hard to hide weren't signs of weakness at all. They were proof that he could still feel. Chapter 11: The Scandal. It started on a Thursday morning. The kind of day that looked harmless. Blue sky, clean air, laughter echoing across the quad. But by noon, everything had changed. It began with a whisper. A leaked document. A blurry photo. Someone had uploaded a screenshot to the university forum. An internal file from the Cha Foundation detailing non-legitimate heirs under the Cha family registry. And right there, in clear, brutal letters, Cha Min-jae acknowledged but not legitimate. By the time Jae-woo saw it, the post already had thousands of views. Comments were flooding in. Cruel jokes, speculation, sympathy dressed as gossip. "So he's just the bastard kid? No wonder he's so quiet. Imagine being rich but still unwanted." Jae-woo's stomach turned. He slammed his laptop shut. Min-jae didn't answer his calls, or his texts. By evening, his apartment was dark, curtains drawn. When Jae-woo finally got inside, Min-jae had left the door unlocked. He found him sitting on the floor, back against the wall, eyes vacant. The glow from his phone screen painted his face in cold light. The university news page was open, his name in bold headlines, comments spilling beneath it like poison. "Min-jae, you shouldn't read those." Jae-woo knelt beside him. Min-jae's voice was a whisper, raw. "They're just saying what my family always thought." "That's not." "It is." His laugh cracked mid-breath. "Illegitimate. Unworthy. A mistake that got too good at pretending." Jae-woo reached out, but Min-jae flinched. Not away from him, but from the contact itself, as if touch might make it more real. "I worked so hard. I thought if I was perfect, it wouldn't matter. That maybe I'd earn the right to exist." Min-jae whispered. "Stop, you don't have to earn it. You already do," Jae-woo said, his voice firm but trembling. Min-jae's eyes glistened, but he looked away. "Everyone's going to see me differently now. You should leave before." "Don't finish that." "I'm not going anywhere," Jae-woo said sharply. He pulled Min-jae into a hug. Min-jae didn't resist this time, just sank against him, silent and shaking. For hours, they stayed like that. No words, no pretending, just breathing through the weight of everything that had broken loose. The next morning, campus was a battlefield of rumor and spectacle. Everywhere Jae-woo went, he could hear it. The hiss of gossip, the click of phones taking secret photos, the pity in people's stares. By noon, Min-jae stopped showing up to class altogether. Jaiwoo was sitting alone outside the library when the crowd suddenly shifted. A murmur rose, sharp, electric. He followed their gaze. At the center of the quad, Min-jae stood rigid, shoulders tense, eyes fixed ahead as two upperclassmen whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. So the bastard finally showed his face. Bet he's still trying to act superior. Before Jaiwoo could move, another voice cut through the air, cold, commanding. Say that again, Taehyun. He strode into the circle like a storm, the crowd parting without question. Gone was the lazy arrogance. In its place was something sharper, heavier, authority. The two students faltered under his gaze. You think gossip makes you powerful? I could buy your futures and end them in the same breath. But it's not worth my time. Taehyun said quietly. He stepped closer, eyes burning. Apologize. The boys hesitated. Taehyun's tone dropped lower. Now. They stammered out apologies before hurrying off. The crowd went dead silent. No one dared look directly at Min-jae anymore. Jaiwoo exhaled slowly, his chest tight. He hadn't expected Taehyun to step in. Not like this. Not with rage on behalf of someone else. Taehyun turned to Min-jae. You shouldn't have come here alone, they're vultures, he said quietly. Min-jae stared at him. Why do you care now? Taehyun's jaw flexed. Because I'm tired of being the reason you bleed. Min-jae blinked, stunned into silence. Jaiwoo saw it. The way years of bitterness and hurt flickered between them, clashing and softening all at once. Taehyun looked around, his voice rising, every word slicing clean through the murmuring crowd. Listen well. Cha Min-jae is worth 10 of anyone here. His name, his blood, none of it changes the fact that he's better than the lot of you combined. If any of you still have something to say, he smiled, all teeth and ice. Say it to me. No one did. When he was done, he turned and walked away without looking back, shoulders taut with fury and guilt. Jaiwoo helped Min-jae to the side of the courtyard. Min-jae looked shaken but not broken this time. He didn't have to do that, Min-jae murmured. No, but maybe he needed to, Jaiwoo said softly. That evening, Jaiwoo found Taehyun sitting alone in the old lecture hall. Lights off, his silhouette framed against the windows. I thought you'd be celebrating your heroic debut, Jaiwoo said quietly. Taehyun didn't turn. Don't start. I'm not. I'm saying thank you. Taehyun laughed without humor. Don't. I didn't do it for thanks. Jaiwoo stepped closer. Then why? For a long moment, there was only silence. Then, Taehyun spoke, his voice low, raw. Because I couldn't stand watching him fall again. Not because of me. Not again. Jaiwoo's breath caught. He'd never heard Taehyun sound like this, stripped of armor, of pride, of everything that made him untouchable. I've spent years pretending I hated him, but I was just angry that he didn't hate me back. That he kept living like I hadn't destroyed him. Taehyun continued. You can still fix this, Jaiwoo said softly. Taehyun shook his head. No, you can't fix what you shattered. You just live with the pieces. Jaiwoo hesitated, then sat beside him. Sometimes that's enough. Taehyun finally looked at him. Eyes rimmed red, voice trembling despite himself. You really believe that? Jaiwoo smiled faintly. I have to. Otherwise, what's the point? For the first time, Taehyun didn't look away. He just breathed long, unsteady, as if the weight he'd been carrying had finally begun to shift. Outside, the rain started again, gentle this time, steady. And for the first time in years, all three of them, Jaiwoo, Min-jae, Taehyun, were caught in the same storm, no longer fighting against it, but learning how to survive inside it. Chapter 12, Confession. The days after the scandal passed like walking through fog. The noise had quieted, but the echoes remained. Whispers in hallways, side glances that lingered too long. Min-jae stopped flinching at them, but his smile never quite reached his eyes anymore. Jaiwoo stayed close. He didn't speak much, didn't press, just stayed. Sometimes that was all Min-jae seemed able to bear. Taehyun, meanwhile, had gone silent. After defending Min-jae so publicly, He disappeared from campus for 3 days. No messages, no explanations. When he finally returned, his expression was unreadable, like he'd folded every emotion back into its box. Couldn't last. Not the silence, not the pretending. Something had to break. It was late on a Sunday when Jaiwoo found them both in the music room. The door was slightly open, light spilling through the crack. Inside, Min-jae sat at the piano, his fingers motionless on the keys. Taehyun stood by the window, hands shoved deep in his pockets. The air between them was thick. Not with anger this time, but with everything they hadn't said. Jaiwoo hesitated before stepping in. "You both look like ghosts." Taehyun's mouth curved faintly. "You make it sound poetic." "It's not, it's sad," Jaiwoo said. Minji's fingers pressed a single note on the piano, soft, wavering. "Maybe we deserve it." Jaiwoo frowned. "No one deserves to drown just because they made mistakes." Silence. Then Min-jae spoke, voice barely above a whisper. "You think this is about guilt?" He turned toward them, and there it was, the exhaustion, the tenderness, the ache. "It's not guilt. It's memory. I keep remembering the boy who used to sit beside me during summer breaks. The one who said, 'We're the same. Family doesn't define us.'" Taehyun's head snapped up. His throat worked before he spoke. "Min-jae, I loved that boy, not the man who came after. Not the one who looked at me like I was something dirty. But I still miss the boy who made me believe I wasn't alone." Min-jae said softly. The confession landed like rain on dry soil. Quiet, inevitable. Taehyun's face twisted, the facade cracking. "You shouldn't still love you? I don't know if it's love or habit. Maybe both. Maybe I never learned how to stop." Min-jae finished for him. Jaiwoo stood still, his heart thudding painfully in his chest. There was no jealousy in him, only understanding. Because he knew that kind of love, the kind built from scars instead of promises. "Min-jae, you don't have to erase what you feel to start again," he said quietly. Min-jae gave him a tired smile. "I'm not trying to start over. I'm just trying to breathe." Taehyun turned away, gripping the edge of the windowsill until his knuckles went white. "You should hate me. Both of you should." "I tried. It didn't work," Min-jae said gently. Taehyun let out a shaky laugh that sounded like it hurt. "You're both insane." Jaiwoo stepped closer to him. "Maybe, but you're the one who taught us how to hide behind anger. We just learned to stop." Taehyun's composure finally broke. He turned sharply, eyes burning. "Do you have any idea what it's like?" he demanded. "To want forgiveness you know you don't deserve? To wake up every day knowing the only person who ever saw you, really saw you, is the one you destroyed." Min-jae rose from the piano bench, walking slowly toward him. "Then say it, say what you couldn't before," he said quietly. For a moment, Taehyun just stared at him, eyes wet, jaw trembling. Then, in a voice that barely made it past his throat, he whispered, "I'm sorry. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. But it hit like thunder. I'm sorry for every word I used as a weapon." Taehyun went on, voice breaking. "For every time I made you believe you were something less. You were the only person I—" He stopped, biting the words back. "And I didn't know how to love you without destroying you." Minji's lips parted, breath unsteady. "Taehyun." Taehyun laughed bitterly. Don't forgive me. I don't want that." Jaiwoo stepped between them, not to separate, but to steady the moment before it shattered. "No one's forgiving anyone," he said quietly. "We're just telling the truth." Taehyun turned to him, eyes red. "And what's your truth, Jaiwoo?" Jaiwoo exhaled. "That I love both of you." The words hung there, trembling in the air. Min-jae blinked, stunned. Taehyun froze completely. Jaiwoo continued, voice steady despite the shaking in his hands. "You, both of you, are broken in ways that make sense together. Min-jae, you keep trying to prove you're enough. Taehyun, you keep trying to prove you're untouchable. But you're both wrong." He looked between them. "You're enough. You're both human. And I love that." Taehyun took a slow step forward. "You can't mean that." "I do. I'm not saying it makes sense. I'm saying it's real, Jaiwoo said. The room went still. The rain outside softened to mist. Min-jae reached out first, his hand brushing Jaiwoo's, hesitant, seeking permission. Jaiwoo took it. A moment later, another hand joined. Taehyun's, rough, shaking, uncertain. For the first time, the three of them stood together. Not as rivals, not as victims, not as penance. Just people wounded, trying, still standing. No one spoke for a long while. There was no need to. The silence between them wasn't heavy anymore. It was full. Finally, Min-jae whispered, "What happens now?" Jaiwoo smiled faintly. "We breathe. We stay. That's enough for tonight." Taehyun let out a weak laugh, half-choked. "You make it sound easy." "It's not, but it's honest," Jaiwoo said. They stayed that way, hands still touching, breath steady, eyes lowered, as the night folded around them. No promises, no definitions. Just a fragile connection, trembling but alive. And for the first time in years, all three of them let themselves exist. Not as broken halves of the past, but as something unfinished, imperfect, and quietly whole. Chapter 13, The Choice. The silence after confession wasn't peace. It was fragile, like walking on glass barefoot, careful with every step, afraid to break what little they'd rebuilt. But for the first time, they were trying. Together, the three of them began orbiting around each other again, cautiously. They shared the same air, the same small spaces, without letting guilt dictate the rhythm. Mornings were the hardest. Jaiwoo would wake first, the soft hum of the coffee machine filling the apartment's narrow kitchen. Min-jae usually appeared next, quiet, hair slightly disheveled, moving with the grace of someone who still carried his past in every breath. Taehyun always came last, half awake, pretending to grumble about everything, but never leaving before drinking the coffee Jaiwoo made. No one called it home, but that's what it slowly became. One morning, Taehyun leaned against the counter, watching Min-jae fiddle with a broken mug handle. "You're still using that thing?" Taehyun asked. Min-jae didn't look up. "It still holds coffee." Taehyun snorted. "You and Jaiwoo both, always clinging to broken things." Jaiwoo, washing dishes, said lightly, "You're one of those broken things too, you know?" Taehyun blinked, startled, almost amused. "And yet, here I am. Lucky you." The words made Min-jae glance up, lips curving faintly. "Maybe lucky us." It was such a small exchange. But in it, something shifted, like the first note of a song finally finding its tune. Their days became oddly normal. Jaiwoo studied and worked. Min-jae quietly handled his graduate research and mentoring duties, and Taehyun attended endless business seminars that he complained about constantly but never skipped. Sometimes, they all ended up in the same library room. Taehyun pretending to read while watching Jaiwoo scribble notes, Min-jae sitting across, expression unreadable but calm. One night, as the campus lights dimmed, Taehyun muttered, "We must look insane from the outside." Jaiwoo looked up. "You mean 3 men sharing notes and snacks?" "No. 3 men trying to learn how to live without destroying each other." Taehyun's voice softened. Min-jae closed his book. "Maybe that's what growing up is." Taehyun met his eyes, and for the first time didn't look away. The tension between them didn't vanish. It changed shape. It became gentler, threaded with warmth instead of fear. The small gestures started meaning everything. Taehyun passing Min-jae his umbrella without comment. Min-jae remembering Jaiwoo's favorite ramen flavor. Jaiwoo falling asleep on the couch and waking to find both of them quietly covering him with blankets. One from each side. It wasn't forgiveness. It was living. One evening, rain tapped against the windows. Jaiwoo sat at the dining table, textbooks spread out. Min-jae leaned against the counter, sipping tea, while Taehyun sprawled across the couch pretending to read a report. "Do you ever think about leaving?" Jaiwoo asked suddenly. Taehyun raised an eyebrow. "Leaving where?" "Everything, the city, the families, the expectations. Just disappearing," Jaiwoo said. Minji's eyes softened. "Every day." Taehyun chuckled, but the sound was hollow. "Running away won't fix anything. Maybe not, but maybe staying the same won't either, Jaiwoo said. The words lingered, echoing through the room. Later that night, they sat together on the small balcony, the city lights flickering below like restless stars. Min-jae was the first to speak. I don't want to keep fighting their battles, my family's, my pasts. I want to build something that's mine, he said quietly. Taehyun stared into the distance. You think it's that easy to walk away? No, but I think it's harder to keep pretending, Min-jae admitted. Jaiwoo looked between them. Then don't. Let's start over. The three of us. Both men turned to him, the idea hanging in the air like something half impossible, half inevitable. Start over, Taehyun repeated. Jaiwoo nodded. No titles, no expectations, just people who survived. Min-jae smiled, slow and genuine. That's the first thing that's made sense in a long time. The days that followed blurred into something soft and steady. They found an apartment, small, sunlit, tucked in a quiet corner of the city. The kind of place where you could breathe without feeling watched. Min-jae chose the bookshelves. Jaiwoo picked the curtains. Taehyun complained about the lack of space but secretly paid the deposit before anyone else could. Their first night there, they didn't talk much. They unpacked, ate instant noodles on the floor, and laughed when Jaiwoo burned his tongue. At some point, Jaiwoo leaned against Min-jae's shoulder, exhausted. Min-jae didn't move away. Taehyun, watching from across the room, sighed. You two are ridiculous. Then, softer, move over. When he sat beside them, Jaiwoo reached out without thinking, fingers brushing Taehyun's wrist. Min-jae's hand followed, resting on top. No one spoke, but everything was said. Later, when the lights were off and the rain began again, Jaiwoo whispered, We're not normal, are we? Taehyun gave a quiet laugh in the dark. Define normal. Min-jae's voice drifted between them. If this is wrong, I don't care. Jaiwoo smiled, feeling the warmth of both their hands. One steady, one trembling. Holding him like a promise neither could name. They weren't perfect. They never would be. But for the first time, they weren't trying to be anyone else's version of good. Weeks later, Jaiwoo passed his final exam with top marks. Min-jae's research was approved for publication. Taehyun began restructuring his family's company, cutting away the corruption that had fed on his guilt for years. At their small celebration dinner, Min-jae raised a glass. To surviving, Taehyun smirked. To running away successfully, Jaiwoo laughed. To staying, even when it's hard. The glasses clinked. Imperfectly, unevenly, but the sound felt right. They didn't label what they had. They didn't need to. What existed between them was messy, fragile, real. Something built not from perfection but persistence. They were still scarred, still healing, still choosing every day to stay. And that choice, for all its uncertainty, was the most honest love they'd ever known. Chapter 14, Still Scarred, Still Here. The summer air was warm and full of endings. Graduation banners fluttered over the campus courtyard, the smell of cut grass mixing with the faint sweetness of blossoms. Laughter echoed, cameras flashed, and names were called one by one. When Kim Jaiwoo rang out over the speakers, the applause that followed wasn't the loudest, but it felt the most real. He crossed the stage slowly, the cap slightly crooked on his head, the certificate clutched tightly in his trembling hands. Somewhere near the back, Min-jae clapped until his palms stung. Beside him, Taehyun tried to look unimpressed, but his jaw was set, his eyes fixed only on Jaiwoo. When Jaiwoo turned to face the crowd, searching, he found them instantly. Two silhouettes standing just apart from the crowd, quietly proud. He smiled. For the first time, it didn't feel like pretending. That evening, the three of them returned to the apartment, their apartment. A modest luxury suite with too many books, half-dead plants, and mismatched mugs. It was home now in the way only something built through survival could be. Jaiwoo placed his diploma on the shelf next to Min-jae's research certificate and Taehyun's stack of business documents. It looked oddly right, three very different worlds pressed together. Taehyun leaned against the counter, loosening his tie. So, Top of your class, huh? Guess you're officially smarter than both of us. Jaiwoo grinned. I always was. Min-jae laughed softly. Don't encourage him. Taehyun shrugged, smiling faintly. Too late. It was an ordinary moment. Teasing easy. And yet it carried the weight of everything they'd survived. The tension that once sat between them had softened into rhythm, into small rituals of coexistence. Minji's life had changed the most quietly. He left the Cha family business without drama. Just a polite resignation letter and a quiet bow. The media still tried to bait him, but he ignored them. He spent his days teaching literature at a small tutoring academy, the kind of work that never made headlines but filled him with calm. Jaiwoo still worked part-time while preparing for graduate school applications. Taehyun's company demanded long hours, but his leadership was changing things. Fairer wages, new scholarships, a quiet defiance against the elitism he'd once embodied. At night, they found each other again. Sometimes in the kitchen, sometimes on the couch, sometimes half asleep and still murmuring about nonsense. One night, Jaiwoo came home late from tutoring. The apartment lights were low, soft jazz playing faintly. Min-jae was sprawled on the couch with a book. Taehyun was in a suit, undone and exhausted. You both look like you've lost a war, Jaiwoo said, dropping his bag. Taehyun groaned. The board meeting was a war. Min-jae smiled without looking up. And I think I won my own battle. A student finally used a metaphor correctly. Jaiwoo laughed, walking over to kiss Minji's temple before ruffling Taehyun's hair. My heroes. Taehyun grumbled, but didn't move away. Moments like that had become their peace, quiet, steady, perfectly unremarkable. Sometimes, though, the past still crept in. One rainy night, Taehyun found Min-jae standing by the balcony, staring into the city lights. His shoulders were rigid, the reflection of old pain in his eyes. You're thinking about them again, Taehyun said quietly. Min-jae didn't deny it. It's strange. I don't hate them anymore, but I don't forgive them either. Taehyun stepped closer. You don't have to. You just have to live better. Min-jae smiled faintly. That's what Jaiwoo says too. He's right. A pause. Then Min-jae turned to face him. And you? Have you forgiven yourself? Taehyun's expression faltered. Some days. Not all. Min-jae reached out, brushing his fingers over Taehyun's wrist, light, grounding. That's enough. From the kitchen doorway, Jaiwoo watched them. The quiet closeness, the gentle honesty, and felt something ache and bloom at once. Weeks passed. Summer melted into late August, and the apartment took on the scent of drying flowers and spilled coffee. Jaiwoo's shoes were always by the door. Taehyun's ties draped over the couch. Minji's books lay open on every flat surface. They fit together like mismatched puzzle pieces that somehow made sense. One morning, Jaiwoo woke to sunlight spilling across the sheets. Minji's arm was draped over his waist, warm and heavy. Taehyun was half awake beside them, eyes squinting against the light. Jaiwoo smiled. We should get up. Taehyun mumbled. You first. Minji's voice was sleepy, amused. Let him rest. He earned it. Graduating isn't that impressive, Taehyun said. Jaiwoo poked his shoulder. Says the man who nearly set his company on fire for fun. Reform. I call it reform. Taehyun corrected. Min-jae chuckled softly, eyes still closed. Call it whatever you want. Just don't burn breakfast again. Taehyun groaned. You never forget anything, do you? Not the important things, Min-jae murmured. The laughter that followed was quiet but real, the kind that didn't need to prove anything. That evening, they went for a walk by the river. The city glowed with soft lights, the water reflecting everything it had learned to carry. Jaiwoo walked ahead a few steps, hands in his pockets, while Min-jae and Taehyun followed behind. You ever think about how far we've come? Jaiwoo said, not looking back. Taehyun smirked. You mean from barely tolerating each other to sharing groceries? Something like that. Minji's gaze lingered on both of them. I used to think love was supposed to fix you. Now I think it's just supposed to let you try again. Jaiwoo turned, smiling at them both. Then we're doing okay. Okay, yeah. We are. Taehyun echoed softly. They stood there for a while, the river murmuring beneath the bridge, the wind carrying the faint scent of jasmine and rain. There was no grand ending, no perfect moment. Just three people still learning, still choosing, still together. Later that night, as they sat on the couch, Min-jae resting against Jae-woo's shoulder and Taehyun quietly scrolling through his phone, Jae-woo said softly, "You know, we're still a mess." Taehyun looked up. "Tell me something I don't know." Min-jae smiled, eyes half closed. "But it's our mess." Jae-woo nodded, voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah, we're still a mess, but it's ours," he said. Outside, the city pulsed softly. Inside, three hearts beat in imperfect rhythm. Scarred, healing, and still here.